right. Greetings, beloved. Hey, listen, Rev here. I am on the People's Power podcast. I'm normally joined by my co-host, Lindsay Harper. She's traveling for work this week. And so I'm holding it down by myself. But I'm not by myself because I've got none other than the great Daniel Blackman, who is here with us. Daniel has done some extremely impactful work in Georgia and beyond. And I'm interested in getting to into his story. But prior to getting into his story, let me introduce Brother Blackman, who I call Brother Blackman because he's a dear brother of mine. Uh, how we doing today, Brother Daniel? And can you just introduce yourself to the people?
Man, I don't know what to do with myself right now, man. I mean, I get to be on a call with my brother. I get to, really introduce myself or reintroduce myself to your audience. And I first want to tell you, it's such an honor because I think what we take for granted is the ability of dialogue. In this time in our country, we're seeing so much lines drawn in the sand, so many protests, so much in our democracy that is moving us away from what truly makes us great, which is the ability to have a conversation that goes all the way back to our heritage with storytelling and throughout the diaspora, man, especially in Africa with our griots and our storytellers. And to be here today to share my story and to answer questions and just have a conversation with a phenomenal brother. And shout out to Lindsay, because she's my sister, man. I know Miss Harper for a long time, and I know if she's not here, she's doing something great. But to those that don't know, Daniel Blackman, I got my work started in the early 2000s with the King family, with Congressman John Lewis, Reverend C.T. Vivian, Reverend Joseph Lowry, Dr. Durley, Zanona Clayton. These are all folks that took me under their wing. My foray into the political space started with Maynard Jackson. He was creating something prior to his death called the American Voters League. And he put his hand on my shoulder. And he said, Daniel, we're going to elect Atlanta's first Black woman to be a mayor. And that was none other than Shirley Franklin. And so I got my start with civil rights royalty and was very fortunate to have had time with them in that space. I worked on voting rights legislation, protecting voting rights, working on anti-poverty legislation, supporting families on lowering utility bills. And then something called Hurricane Katrina happened in 2005. And it fundamentally changed my life because even though I did not live in the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans or anywhere in Baton Rouge or throughout Louisiana, I felt the impact of that. Worked with several of Atlanta's civil rights community, including T.I. We all worked with the radio stations. We got athletes, entertainers, civil rights leaders, and we responded to our brothers and sisters in need in New Orleans. And at that time, that is where my career really started because I took the civil rights background that I had gotten for, the past 6 or 7 years and translated that into the climate space. Met Van Jones when he was running Green for All. Van introduced me to, some really good people in the space that I didn't really realize at the time. Brother Malcom, that, I didn't realize there were people that looked like us that were making decisions nationally and internationally in the climate space. About 2 months after Van and I had a conversation, I traveled with Congressman John Lewis and a very good friend of mine, Rachelle O'Neal. And I got to travel to Selma with Congressman Lewis. And he said to us on that ride that there's a gentleman, Senator Barack Obama, that we're going to endorse. And he said, when we get back to Atlanta, he's going to be at Wheat Street Baptist Church. And we're going to endorse this young man. And I did not believe anyone but Hillary at the time was going to run for office. And I was very fortunate with Reverend Durley, Reverend Vivian, Reverend Lowry, to be in a room where we basically, I don't use the phrase anointed at that time, but that was the entry point of being able to meet Senator, to be ultimately be President Obama, and work with the Obama administration for a few years on the Clean Power Plan, the Let's Move campaign. It's on Us, Every Kid in the Park, My Brother's Keeper. I was very blessed to be on the front line of the Obama presidency. That translated into a very close relationship with former President Biden, that ultimately led to me being appointed to serve as the first Black man to lead as a regional administrator in US EPA Region 4, which is the Southeastern United States. So my journey is maybe at its midpoint, but there's so much more that I have to offer to our community, to our country, and to the diaspora. Shout out to Barbados, man. My family heritage is Barbados. My grandfather was a diplomat. My cousin was a prime minister. So I do have political roots in the diaspora, man. So thank you.
That listen, that's awesome and an awesome history. Um, you and I connect at Dr. Durley.
That's right.
I often tell people, Daniel, the key phrase or the key talk that I heard from Dr. Durley that changed my whole projection as far as ministry is concerned, and versus where I was at the time versus where I am now. He said this. He said, "How can I preach to them in my pulpit, shout them in my pews, but they can't breathe in public?"
That's
And,
right.
and
And I
that
have a
that
similar one, Dr. Durley said, how can we march if we can't breathe?
yeah. I mean, it's that practical, but it makes a whole lot of sense to me. Um, and at the time I was pastoring Rush Memorial on the AU campus.
Wow.
And after hearing that ministry changed the trajectory of ministry, I started People's Justice Council, and eventually I had to make a decision on whether or not I would continue to pastor the church or do this full time.
Wow.
And
Wow.
thanks be to God, I made that decision, and I feel like grace has been with me the whole time. Not that I know what
Beautiful.
I'm doing. It's just that grace has been with me. You did something extremely profound and impactful as well. You ran for the Georgia Public Service Commission.
I
Let me
did.
ask you, one, can you explain to the people what the Public Service Commission is? Now, it won't be the first time that our listeners have heard about Public Service Commission because, of course, we are the People Power podcast. But can you explain to them how you see the Public Service Commission and how important it was or why it was so important for you to actually run for office and get involved in that way?
Yeah, I mean, most people don't understand that public utility commissions or public service commissions are either appointed in a state like California or they are an elected position. In Georgia's case, we have 5 elected public service commissioners. Up until last year, for the past 2 decades, all of them have been Republican, and the majority of them had been appointed due to lapses in service and various other political and legal challenges. But I'll say this, y'all, when I think of the federal government, many people don't even realize I was Bernie Sanders' political director as well in the state of Georgia. And when you look at working families, right? When you look at how folks are struggling to either keep their lights on or put food on the table, struggling to pay their medication or to, keep their lights on, senior citizens on a fixed income, when their utility bills go up, their income doesn't change. And what was profound the first time I ran a serious race for the Public Service Commission, we got more votes in the state of Georgia than any other Democrat statewide in the history of a constitutional office. We got right north of 2.4 million votes. And when I think about the importance of this race, that was the first time definitively we understood the power of this race, which is to regulate our utilities. Energy burden in the United States is immense. Affordability, the ability for folks in communities, especially communities of color, that are struggling with high asthma rates, coal ash contamination in water. These are all areas that are overwhelmingly impacted by decisions made, in Georgia's case, by 5 members of the Public Service Commission. From a morality standpoint, Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy died 61 days apart, both fighting for the same thing. Dr. King in Memphis fighting for the Poor People's Campaign for the sanitation workers, Bobby Kennedy in Appalachia fighting for poor coal miners. And we have forgotten our way in this country as it relates to working families' ability to keep their lights on. Families in rural parts of our country that if they don't pay their light bill, they can't pay their rent, they get evicted. So we need to understand governors are important, mayors are important, presidents are important, but locally, our ability to keep our lights on when it's dark, right? our ability to be able to have our air conditioning running when summers are hot and our heaters running when winters are cold. In cities like Chicago, over the last decade, we've seen increased amount of seniors dying because of extreme heat events. And these are decisions made by public service commissioners that determine your utility rates and, quite frankly, a lot of your energy burden overall.
When we look at the Public Service Commission, I often say this is one of the best kept secrets for us when it comes down to our economic upward mobility, because this is how your bills are decided as far as your utility bills are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Um, now, this last time you ran for Public Service Commission, one, how many times have you run? But then, can you explain the last experience? Because I mean, I was gun ho and ready to vote for you. I had other folks that I'm saying vote for Brother Blackman, vote for Brother Blackman, and then next thing you know, boom, it all kind of went away.
Yeah.
Explain that experience, because I think it points out another injustice that we need to bring before the people, so that they can further have something to advocate against and vote for.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put it to you like this. We faced a legal challenge that we didn't run away from. I mentioned earlier when I was the regional administrator, I regularly had to stay in Atlanta, and we were very fortunate at the time to have a property outside of Metro Atlanta, as well as apartment obligations I had while I was in the city of Atlanta. Look, I never planned for running for the Public Service Commission or having any kind of residency challenge or issue. I did it purely out of place of, you know, things happen, right? Like my kids, as I mentioned earlier, I've got one son at Morehouse and one at Savannah College of Art and Design. We were transitioning back into Atlanta. We weren't even thinking about the Public Service Commission because it actually wasn't supposed to be on the ballot for 2026. Well, the legal challenge that happened in 2022 allowed the Secretary of State to put the Public Service Commission race on the ballot in February of 2025. I had no intentions of running for the Public Service Commission. As a matter of fact, at the time, which may be a surprise to some folks, I was being considered to put my name in the hat to be chair of the Democratic Party of Georgia. So we were all having conversations about, what do I think I need to do? Is it political? Is it advocacy? And at the time, we had begun to make a transition, and we decided that Atlanta was going to be the best move for us over the next year, which was 2024 to 2026. We wanted to make sure we began to make a transition. Unfortunately, the timing wasn't great for us, but we put our name on the ballot. It is common practice to have multiple properties or residencies in the state of Georgia. As a matter of fact, there are two members, one former member of the commission that was not even a resident in the area. And so we weren't doing anything with malice intent. We weren't doing anything to deceive the voting process. I thought that it was in our best interest, with the transition that we had begun to make in 2024, to put my name on the ballot in 2025, seeing that the election would have been at the end of 25. And look, we can say it was a miscalculation or whatever the case may have been, but we were in every right, we felt, to run for office and to position ourselves for that seat. And that's what the lawsuit was about, that was bought by Georgia conservation voters and so many more people. The way districts are set up in Georgia, where you can vote statewide, but you have to live in a district. The argument was a dilution of the vote. That argument was initially awarded in favor of progressive minded folks and hardworking families in Georgia and organizations. That vote was then changed. There was a 2-year gap on the vote. It was put on the election, the race. It was put back on the ballot. We were ready. I had just left the Environmental Protection Agency. And it's one of those things where it's a lesson learned, right? And I was very disappointed then, but I worked my butt off. People like myself, Lindy Miller, Georgia conservation voters, Ms. Harper, yourself, we worked for the last 3 years to build an infrastructure for candidates to win, whether my name was on the ballot or someone else's. And I'm very proud of over decades of work that we have done to make these seats winnable, but also to put other people in a position to get at least 3 seats on the Public Service Commission that will, quite frankly, give us the ability to vote in our favor and in favor of the people for a very long time.
Well, we have powerful Southern people, not Southern company, campaign where we are advocating for Southern Company, one, across the board in the 3 states that they have subsidiaries to operate the same across the board. Whereas in Georgia you have more lax ability to use alternative energy. In Alabama, they have taxed it to the point where it doesn't make it feasible for you to do.
Yeah.
Um, in Mississippi, it's a whole nother rule for using alternative energy sources. And at the same time, everybody's bills across the board have increased by at least three times.
That's right.
Um, and then you've got the threat of these data centers coming in that takes it up even more. And so your public service commissions, beloved, becomes extremely, extremely important to pay attention to, because these are the ones that decide what your regulations are going to be, or what your bill's going to be. They the ones that decide how much you're going to pay and how much these utility companies can charge you. And so with powerful Southern people, not Southern Company, we've been calling for transparency. We've been calling for them to operate the same across the board. But also, we want to make sure we're promoting those candidates and the positions of those candidates, basically C3, basically just so we can make sure the public knows about these candidates. As I always say it, a phrase I always use because most people can identify with it, we just want to make them sexy.
Yeah.
And that way they become appealing for everybody to pay attention to, because this is extremely, extremely important.
That's right. I think what people don't realize, and I'm going to give a number that's going to probably shock most people. In the last 5 years, utility rates, electricity rates specifically, have increased by almost 300%. And when you look at that amount of money in Georgia alone, 10% of our income goes to our utility bills. I mean, when you look at what 10%, that means if you're making $50,000 a year, you're paying 5,000 in utility costs. You're making 100,000, you're paying 10,000. When you have 10% of a person's bill paycheck that can go towards utilities, that's gas money. That's money for eggs. That's money to put away for your kids to go to college so they don't incur debt. That's money you can spend for a senior citizen on a fixed income. We have to understand the human cost of data centers. We have to understand that while energy and consumption, let me just be very clear, because I think people need to understand the argument. We're not saying there's not a need for data centers. I get it, right? Like we're cloud computing, we're storing data. Some folks got 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 messages in the cloud, right? Our kids are on Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, X. I get it. We are living in the age of AI. However, the lack of responsibility in the transition to AI, the lack of transparency in what we're trying to accomplish, is causing a very high burden on working class families and on poor people. It is compromising our health. It is compromising our abilities to build wealth. It is compromising our abilities to manage the economics locally in our communities. And we're being sold a bill of goods that don't make sense. When I ran the Environmental Protection Agency as a regional administrator in states like Kentucky, where we saw massive poverty, a lot of these data centers and these cryptocurrency facilities were leaving a tremendous burden from a health and wealth perspective and costing these communities a lot more. And when they would leave, the communities were stuck with the bill. In states like Virginia, you have over 500 data centers that have gone up in the past several years. In West Virginia, excuse me. So we have to understand where we are today and where we are going as a society is not at a pace where it is in the best interest of the communities that are being burdened with contaminated water, loose restrictions on air quality, and quite frankly, not enough information for them to understand how this impacts their daily lives. So we've got a lot of work to do, but it starts with elected officials. It starts with community members. We've got to educate each other, and we've got to be on the same page. I am in full support of moratoriums on the development of data centers. They're not coming, they're here. I get that. but before we build 1,000 more, let's pump the brakes and make sure that the community is in the best pace to not be compromised from a health or from a financial standpoint.
Just for the audience, 6% of if you are paying 6% of your household income to your utility, I mean to your energy, you already at high energy burden.
That's right.
10% gets into the excessive high energy burden zone, meaning nobody is supposed to pay over 6% of their income to their utilities. Yet you're paying 10%, and it's scheduled to grow
That's right.
according to science because of data centers. So I need y'all to hear this clearly. Your wealth, your wealth is being lost, not just your economic wealth or your financial wealth, your resource wealth as well, your natural resources. Again, nobody has been able to invent water. I ain't found it yet. And if we have to compete with data centers for our drinking water, we will lose. Where
We
it
will
is
lose
that you,
immensely.
yes, where it is that you drink between 6 to 8 cups of water per day. The average hyperscale data center uses an Olympic sized pool of drinking water per day.
And here's what people aren't taking into consideration, Brother Malcolm. We're not even talking about nuclear plant Vogtle in Georgia that takes up to 80 million gallons of water. I mean, so you got to
Right.
understand the fight for water isn't just, we're already compromising our ability to have access to water, and our infrastructure that we tried to rebuild under the Biden administration is now being scaled back. So I really appreciate you pointing that fact out on the compromise that we're having to access to water, clean water.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, bro Blackman, you did the EPA. You were one of the regional administrators of the EPA. Can you tell us about that and what were some of your biggest accomplishments while you were there?
What's interesting about EPA is that, I want to first shout out the career employees in the federal government, many of which have lost their jobs, and those that are still there. Career employees are not political appointees. They are men and women that vote Democrat, Republican, Independent. They are working their butts off every day to make sure grants get out the door and to make sure our water is protected. I was very proud of what Administrator Regan was able to do in pushing for legislation and policies that EPA took against PFAS contamination, or for your audience, forever chemicals that are in water that we have seen carcinogens and different areas have an impact. I was very proud of the bipartisan infrastructure law, $1.2 trillion, the advancement of Justice 40% of federal funds at the time committed to marginalized communities. We were able to put hundreds of millions of dollars out the states that needed water infrastructure. Really cool fact, right? I think it's cool. We had the largest region in EPA, arguably, is Region 4. We have 8 states, 6 federally recognized tribes. 6 of my 8 states were all run by Republicans, all Republican governors. I had DeSantis, but I also had Beshear, right? I also had Governor Cooper in North Carolina. But I'll tell you, the coolest part about it was going into states that may or may not have been anti-climate that weren't turning our money away. It was like, $270 million for water infrastructure for the state of Florida for ecotourism and to make sure that they were able to recover faster. Interagency collaboration with FEMA, with the Department of Energy, with the Department of Agriculture. Our accomplishments included rolling out the largest on record allotment of electric school buses. 25 million kids wake up every day in the United States to ride a school bus, right? They expect those buses to get them to school and to get them home. I grew up with asthma, so I understand how important it is for buses that are emitting their fuel into our atmosphere and environment. It's important for us to understand those buses sit idle and it increases the ability to have an impact on our health, right? And
Right.
so our children being able to breathe, we were able to do so much by getting grants out, prioritizing environmental justice. But even back to what you said about data centers, we were putting things in place yearly respiratory illness and asthma cost the United States upwards of $20 billion. I mean, you have to understand that when we are thinking about the public health cause, I am most proud of the rural communities that have been left behind all over the state, not just for Black and brown communities, but in the rural communities throughout Kentucky and Tennessee and Alabama. We were able to do a lot to help that. I will say this in closing on this question: Jackson, Mississippi. They needed so much more, but we were able to get $600 million under my leadership to Jackson, Mississippi. We were able to get, tens of millions of dollars to Lowndes County, Alabama for water infrastructure. We could have done more. We should have done more, but I'm proud of what we were able to do to help transform these communities that need so much of our support and, quite frankly, hadn't trusted the federal government for a long time.
Let me publicly say thank you, because I remember talking to you during the midst of all of that, and the push to get the funding out that was promised, and
Yeah,
how hard you all worked to make sure that you could get all that you could out. Now, we do know that the new administration came in and messed up some of that, but nevertheless, you all worked extremely hard to get what you could out before the new administration came in.
that's right.
So let me say thank you for that. But juxtaposed from then and that administration, as well as your history to where we are now, how would you advise us who are advocates, us who are in scientists, who are environmentalists, environmental justice advocates? How would you advise us to move in this moment, knowing your history juxtaposed to where we are today?
I think one of the most valuable lessons that I learned so I was closest of all the civil rights leaders that I have been privileged to know and to serve under. Reverend C.T. Vivian and Reverend Gerald Durley were more than mentors. I lost my father very young. My father was 54 years old when he passed away. And Reverend Durley and Reverend Vivian, there was never a moment that they did not teach me about this work. But it was Reverend Joseph Lowry that said to me one day, he said, "You're too quiet." He looked at me and he said, "You've been up under us this long. We don't need you in the background marching. We don't need you in the meetings quiet. We need you to be more intentional." My work ended with EPA as the first ever senior advisor to STEM and diversity within the agency. My job was to rebuild the federal workforce, because less than 1% of our federal workforce was of color. I'm sorry, less than 1% of our executive leadership within that. So appointees, directors, administrators. EPA, when I left, it was 16,500 employees. Less than 7% were under 35. My job and my role was to help rebuild that. When you mention scientists, or my son, who's a mechanical engineer at Morehouse College, we need to do two things. Number one, we need to reposition and realign our young people for the jobs of the future. We keep hearing about the threats of AI taking away jobs. We need to start activating our HBCUs, our tribal institutions, and our minority serving institutions to prepare these young men and women for STEM related jobs. AI is here. There are a lot of things that autonomous driving and automation is going to do that is going to take a large swath of our jobs. However, when you look at the engineers, the chemists, the biologists that are graduating, their jobs right now within federal agencies, and I will say this on the record, I believe that we will get past the current storm, the current administration that we're in. And we have one of two options. We can either find ourselves in a state of paralysis, not knowing what to do, or we can be prepared to rebuild the institutions that have been dismantled. We need to be prepared to rebuild institutions. And the second part of that is we need, from a grassroots standpoint, to not retreat the Signal and the WhatsApp and the different hidden platforms. I understand the importance of men and women in this country that are scared. I mean, we've seen the onset of ICE. We've seen this administration politicize its enemies. We need to be on the front line. There was no social media post for Dr. King to hide behind. There was no rock that Reverend Jackson or Ambassador Young could have. They had to be out front. We got to get back to a frontline strategy that says utility bills are too high, affordability is almost non-existent, working families don't have a voice when they're on their third job, and this community needs people to stand up for environmental justice and to push back against this hostile takeover of what we have spent the last 20, 30 years in building, which is a pathway to rebuild our communities with renewable energy and with public health standards that are embedded in policies that don't utilize and weaponize environmental justice against communities that are suffering the most.
That's amazing. Um, I, I feel led to do this. This is not in the script, but speaking on this current administration and looking at the rollback of the endangerment finding, looking at what you just said, how would you articulate your advocacy um, for the endangerment findings? Um, and how do we move forward knowing that there's this assault on our community?
You know, one of the biggest disappointments I have in this rollback into the rescind these spaces is we got to start off with the basic, which is education. You say endangerment finding the most people, they're not going to know what the heck you're talking about. We have to simplify this message and get back to supporting citizen scientists. We got to get back to the Ms. Johnsons and the Dr. Allens and these people that are in our institutions, the Clark. We got to rethink our HBCUs. Their doors are closing. Their doors are closing. We have to train our communities on how to give public comment. We've got to train these influencers on how to write op-eds and blogs to help make this more palatable. We've got to make sure that the NAACP, the Urban League, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and all these different organizations understand what coalition means. I think the biggest weapon that has been used in this country from the government in many cases has been the dismantling of the ability for coalitions to be built in our country. We need to be able to get back to rooms where I know that your organization is raising money. I know that your organization's membership is dropping. I know that this organization over here, you know, you guys are struggling to be relevant. We need the coalition to come back together. What Reverend Jackson mentioned is the Rainbow Coalition. What Dr. King and the SCLC did, what we saw the Obama coalition do. We need to this needs to be a reset moment where we can address what's going on within that. Most people don't realize that through the endangerment, the rescinding of many of these areas with, you know, vehicle emissions, right? In cities like Atlanta, where we're growing, if you look at the World Cup coming in traffic and, you know, the health and compromising health, the compromise of it, I mean, the consequences of it, if we're not looking at the long-term effect of rolling back these policies, we're going to be in a really, really, really irreversible position. So I would say two things that we can do immediately on the education side. We need to get our grass tops, our executive directors of organizations, our leaders, and our elected officials that are concerned about public health and the environment. We need to start having more intentionality around that. I watched the NAACP Image Awards the other night and was very concerned to a point that was made by Dr. Marshall Shepard, who's a good friend, that we are highlighting the prominence of, you know, high-level positions, but not STEM-related and scientists. We have to educate people and bring those rooms together to have a unified message. And then lastly, we need to work to ensure that the next administration, if we work hard enough and we get the right person to potentially be a nominee, we need to make sure that anyone that says they want our votes are committed to restoring that which is being dismantled currently. And we need to know what their plan is, not for the next 4 years, but for the next decade. What safeguards do you put in place? What legal measures are on the table? And what are we doing right now, today, in this moment, to ensure that this is a part of the next president of the United States' agenda to not only appoint the right cabinet members, but to put things in place that prioritize science and not industry?
Man, listen, you got me ready to run around. I ain't gonna lie. You hitting right on where I am with it, bro Daniel. Um, Listen, we got to get ready to get out of here, y'all. We can go on and on and on because I enjoy picking his brain. Um, what's next for you, Doc? What you got going on next?
That's what
What can we get
you
in
gonna put
touch?
me on the spot in front of all these people to tell you what I'm doing next. I can't.
I'm just trying to figure it out. You already said you had plenty of time and grown folks, so I'm
Oh
just
my
trying to figure
God.
out what good trouble you about to get into.
I'll say this. I have given a lot of thought, man. This year I was asked, to be fully transparent. There are 3 or 4 seats that I've been asked or try to be recruited to run for. My desire right now is to embody the spirit of Malcolm and of Martin, of Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu and Ambassador Young and Congressman Lewis. Um, I think what our world needs right now, what our communities need right now, is advocacy more than candidacy. I feel very strong that I could put my name on a ballot for multiple areas and have a great shot. And I don't say that with any ounce of arrogance. I really just think that the time for people like me that can offer a policy and a grassroots perspective combined is very attractive for this moment in our country. We've seen what happens when you put a Fox News correspondent to run the military. We need people that are going to be intelligent and that are going to not think solely Democrat or Republican, but that are going to be able to push a rational middle. And I think the best way for me to do that is to take collectively what I've learned from all these great leaders. I have a book that it's not here, but I'll share with your leaders. But Harry Belafonte called a meeting before he passed away that I was a part of, and it was the last remaining civil rights leader. So we had Ambassador Young and so many leaders, and in that meeting is where I'll close. What I think is important for this moment is to understand that, with the exception of a Zenona Clayton, a Durley, and an Ambassador Young, we have lost the majority of our civil rights leaders. Their legacies either live on through the Malcolms and the Bernice Kings and the Daniel Blackmans of the world, or their legacies die with them. And someone told me one time that it's the darkness of the womb or the darkness of the tumor, right? Is this a burial or a resurrection? What's next for me is a part of resurrecting our democracy. It's not allowing us to lose. We celebrate this 250 years of America, but we're less than 100 years removed from the Jim Crow era and from Reconstruction. And I think that I am best suited right now as an advocate and as a sounding board for our communities, because too many of us have given our blood, they've given their sweat. And who am I to judge a person who's now paying for their kid to go to college that can't make a march or a rally? I think what we need right now is advocacy, and that's where I'm going to spend my time until another door opens.
Listen, man, I appreciate you as not just a colleague and an admirer of your work, but as a brother and a friend. I'm grateful to know you. I'm grateful to be in the same circles with you. And listen, I'll see you out there on the battlefield. As our mentor, Reverend Durley, has told us, it's one thing to be on the battlefield. It's a whole nother thing to be out there in the battle.
Yeah, no, it is one thing, to your point, for who is going to run is one thing to campaign and it's another thing to govern. So for those who are going to run for office, Brother Malcolm, I want to thank you because you're one of the few people that can speak to an elected official, a grassroots organizer, or just the common man. And I want to thank you, brother, because we tend to give flowers to people when they're gone. And I want to tell you, brother, from the AUC days to where you are today, I thank you for your leadership. I thank you for all the rooms you're in that no one will ever know. And I thank you for fighting for us every day.
Brother, I appreciate you so very much. I appreciate you so very much. Hey, listen, as always, we offer to you love, peace, and life.